Welcome back to my channel. So today I have another special guest. His name is Bond, and Bond and I worked in one of the top law firms in Nigeria. About when was that? 2018, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's when we
it was
started.
2018.
Yes, yes. So, yeah. Seems like it's been ages now. But yeah, this is going to be an exciting episode because Bond came to shake tables
I'm
and
screaming.
he came to shake tables and spill the tea. So make sure you stay tuned. All right then, Bond, please could you introduce yourself to us in a nutshell?
So very quickly, I'm Bond. Well, not James Bond though, but I'm Bond, that kind of Bond. I used to work at UUBO. I worked from 2018 till 2022, and I left to go do my master's at Stanford, and then afterwards, started working with a law firm here in the US, um, um, Cytoskin Partners. So you need to say that.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Bond. It's fine. You don't need to spill all the tea now. Okay. So let's just dive into my first question, which is why did you decide to pursue an LLM and why Stanford?
So, Chella, the thing is, LLM was never on my mind, like in terms of, I must do an LLM. I just knew that after 5 years, I needed to, assess what I wanted to do with my career. And for me, the LLM was supposed to be a period for me to be able to think, like a 1 year period for me to think and figure out what's the next thing. So I wanted to spend 5 years working with UUBO and then do a 1 year self-assessment, based on my career. And when I was going to make that decision to do my LLM, that was a time when this whole jackpotting was it was a concept for a whole lot of Nigerians, and a lot of my friends had already started going abroad. And I knew that at that point, I needed to also see what was in it for me. And after doing my own initial assessment, doing my research and all that, I kind of, figured out that if I was going to, move to the US or move abroad, then I needed to go to a school or do an LLM in a top school. If it wasn't a top school, I wasn't going to do LLM. It just, for me at that time, it just didn't make any sense to do an LLM in any school that wasn't a top school in the US. And for me, Stanford was one of those schools that, if I mentioned, oh, hey, I graduated from Stanford, then it would make things easier for me to get a job, to be able to, network with people. And that was the idea. And that's the reason why I said, maybe Stanford would be a perfect choice for me, of which, Harvard was always the dream. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way I expected it to do, but hey, Stanford was there to pick me up when, Harvard threw me away. Well, that was how I got into Stanford.
Mm. Okay, well done, Bond. I mean, even though you didn't get into Harvard, Stanford is still it's still a big deal. So well done.
Oh, it is a
So do
big
you have
deal.
any? Sorry, what do you say?
I said it is a big deal.
Oh, of course it is. It is. Okay. So do you have any tips for anyone who also wants to um, study for an LLM in Stanford or in an Ivy League university in the US? So would you, or can you tell us like three or four tips that you have?
Well, first tip is if you want to do an LLM in the US, make sure you're planning to go to back home. Like if your goal is to do an LLM and that's what it is, go back. Be ready to go back to Nigeria. Be ready to, go through the struggles. If for me, that's the first thing you need to make your mind up. If you're coming to the US to do an LLM in an Ivy League school, be ready to go back home. And I mean, in the course of this interview, I'll explain why I said so. But in terms of core tips on how to get into these schools, um, I feel like getting your resume right and your applications right is a very key thing for you to, figure out how to put your applications together. It's something that initially I had no idea about. And thankfully, there were resources that I could be able to leverage on and be able to gain access into these sorts of applications. And tell you, I'm not sure whether this is the best place to be able to say, but I mean, getting Edu was a very good resource for me because at the time I didn't know jack about what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a resume for an application for an LLM. I didn't know what a personal statement was. I didn't know how the recommendation letters would go, and just going through that getting edu sort of boot camp or stuff like that was really helpful to me in sort of putting my application together, and then also having friends that have either been through that process or are going through that process with you, sort of helps you a lot in terms of, pushing you, because there were days where I felt like I wanted to give up. But I had this friend who is currently in Harvard now. Her name is Takuro. Takuro Kaindi. I'm not sure if you know her, but she was my accountability partner then. We were both applying to Harvard at the time. She didn't get in that year, but I got into Stanford. So she took a year back and then applied the following year and then got into Harvard. But while she was my backbone at the time, I was also her backbone. And so having that sort of, person to keep you accountable to the process and how you do these things is really, really important. And then also people who have been through that process. At the time, Daniel Jayoba was already doing his MBA at Harvard. So there was always someone to talk to about these sorts of things. Faith Izomime was already, had already finished from Harvard Law School for, doing her LLM, and she was also a very good, resource, if I were to put it that way. And then other people who I sent my applications to help me, get a second, review and those sorts of things. I think having people, friends that have been through that process, and even if you don't have friends or people that have been through that process, essentially reaching out to people who you don't know, but they're there. So you want to get into a school like maybe Yale, or you want to get into a school like Harvard. And so what you're doing is looking for people, maybe on LinkedIn or wherever it is that people look for people these days, that have been through those schools, maybe who have done LLMs in those schools, and you'll be able to ask them about the process, get a sense of how they did theirs, and then try and tailor yours into a similar format so that you're able to get through. I think that's a very helpful thing to do.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, one thing that I picked up from what you said was having friends and accountability partners. Because if you don't have, like, the saying that goes, your net worth or your network is your net worth. This is like, this is it's exactly what it says, because if you didn't have friends or people that you knew that were also on that same path, then you wouldn't have had people to lean on. Excuse me. Then you wouldn't have had people to lean on whenever you felt down or low. So that's very important. Okay, so that takes me on to my next question. How were you able to navigate studying with being married? Because, like, you didn't tell us that you're married and you even have a child. So, guys, if you were eyeing him, sorry, he's married.
I am happily married to the most amazing woman on earth. No offense to you, Teller, but and other women are out there, but I'm married to the most amazing woman on earth, and I have the most beautiful daughter ever. She melts my heart a lot. And how was I able to cope? Teller, this question is very deep. So at the time, let's take you back to just give people context. So I got married in June 4th of 2022, the year that I left, and then left for school in September of that year. And this was me, a married guy, newlywed. I had not yet enjoyed my wife yet, so and I was leaving and living for the US. Would have loved to take her along with me, but Nigeria happened to us. Her passport wasn't ready in time because the passport office was literally holding on to the passport for God knows whatever reason. To them, I have no idea why that the passport just would not. They just would not give renew her passport in time, and I had to go by myself. It was a very sad and tragic time for us because this was us who we had barely. I think it was a year before that. She was in Enugu, I was in Lagos, and we finally got back together in Lagos. We got married, and then this was me going again on another journey outside the country with a different time zone. And then we're trying to figure out how that was going to work. And when I got to Stanford, we had to find a balance because this was us. You were saying to ourselves that our marriage must work, and we had timetables. Tell it, or I mean timetable. You know that okay at 9 p.m. my time, I have to call my wife, and she knows at her own time. 9 p.m. my time would have been because I think California was about I think 8 or 9 hours different from Nigeria. So when she woke up in the morning at 6 a.m. going to work, I would most likely be fast asleep, maybe at 12 or 1 a.m. And she would call and I'd have to be awake to pick. So I wasn't going to bed until 1 or 2. So what I did was to be able to keep myself awake, I would, find time to do assignments during that time or, do some studying so that I'm still awake during that period. So my standard sleep time started from 2 a.m. in the morning. And then we'll talk from all through her way through driving to work, while I'm also, multitasking by doing an assignment or something. And she gets to work. We talk for the next 1 hour before she starts work at 9, or at 8. I can't remember what time it is she started work. And that's how we managed it. And once I went to class, we always had like a 1 hour, 2 hour break in between, which was in the afternoon. And by the afternoon, Nigerians were already in the night. So I would call her in that period, and then we'll talk and talk and talk. I wasn't going to the library as often because the spare time I had in between classes, I had to use to talk to my wife. And that was how I sort of managed it. It was very daunting because the time zones were different. We would do a lot of video calls just to be able to make things, at least we can see each other and then, update each other on how our day went. And then we just try to make it, keep it very, light, very sweet, and that sort of thing. And for me, that was essentially how we were able to survive it. And then just realizing that, okay, I was going to come back to visit and then would, keep processing her visa as soon as her passport came out.
Okay. So one thing that I learned from this is that you guys were intentional, like
Yeah.
super intentional. And the truth is that difficult seasons don't last, storms don't last. And now you're back, you're reunited with your beautiful baby girl. And I'm so excited. I'm so happy for you. I'm actually happy for you because I remember when you left, I actually reached out to your wife
Yeah.
and I said, because I was apart. My husband and I were apart for like 7 weeks after we got married, and it just seemed like 7 years. Honestly, I wasn't really eating. I was just so anxious. We got married right before COVID. So yeah, I reached out to her and she was like, "Oh, it's not easy." But I just kept assuring her that don't worry, like it will come. It's a season. Seasons will come and they will go. So yeah, so um I'm happy for both of you.
Do you remember when we had that conversation? We had a conversation before I went to, I started, I think before I started doing the application abroad and stuff like that. We had talked, both of us, you and I had spoken about whether or not we should have kids before we go and all that. I don't know if you remember. And you were saying, oh no, make sure you guys don't have kids. Make sure you don't do that before you go, that sort of thing. But something about when that time came was that, what, we needed to plan and be intentional, as you say. And I think that's the thing for us. And I had said that time that, okay, I'll come back in March and we'll try and have a baby. At least that will keep her occupied till when she's ready to move to the US, and then we'll have the kid in the US. All this was planning and hoping that the US embassy does not, screw us over. So essentially, when I came back in March, we tried to have a baby that March, and thankfully it worked. And then we started, we the hope was that she would be occupied with the pregnancy and all that, and there'll be family members to sort of give her support, and she'll be looking forward to moving to the US to have the baby. That was the idea, to sort of, make her, would like to essentially keep her occupied, essentially, just so that it doesn't feel like, oh, she misses everything so much. At all, at all. No regrets, no regrets whatsoever. It all worked out. Her visa was approved in August. Yeah, it was approved in August, a week before our rent expired in Lagos. Um, and she came. I think she came. When did she come again? I think September 1st, or yeah, the first week in September. And so the visa got approved. I let our landlord know that, oh hey, look, we're not paying rent again because we're moving. And she came to the US. It was a very exciting time, expecting her to come, knowing that the visa was approved, having the baby in the US. I mean, that's a whole different conversation entirely. But yeah, I don't regret any bit of it.
Maybe you come back to talk about maybe you come back to talk about like your family life in the UK, since this is career focused. All right, so let's jump to job hunting. Hmm? So talk us through your job hunting process, like the challenges that you faced while job hunting after your masters.
I think, I generally think that the US is a lot more daunting than people let on. And that's one of the things that really gets me irritated by some Nigerians, essentially. I don't think that a lot of Nigerians tell people the truth about how things are in the US or outside the US. Save for those people in Canada or you know, or in the UK that says, don't come to the US, don't come to Canada and all that, Instagram thing. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people who are in the US, I'm talking generally in the US, I don't think people who talk about these things are very truthful about what the realities are. And I feel like when people reach out to you to ask for guidance or ask for some sort of, the direction on what to do in terms of their plans coming to the US, you owe them the very bit to like tell them, okay, look, this is the reality. But I'm not telling you not to come. I'm not telling you to discourage you, but I'm telling you this is the reality so that you can be prepared for what is to come. Do you see? I got into the US to do my master's at a time when there was a boom. So shortly after COVID, there was a boom in the legal industry where a lot of law firms were looking for, people to, work. Essentially, if you were a warm body that could do any legal task, big law firms would hire you regardless, right? And I came in just after that. So people who went to law to do their LLM a year before me all got jobs. Like everybody got jobs, got offers. I know someone who got over 8 offers. I know someone who got after their LLM got to 6 offers. So like it seemed like though there was a lot of work, right? And so I also reached out to people who, had come way before then, before COVID, to get a sense of, and I'm not going to call names, but to get a sense of what the market is like and how, job hunting is like. And for some weird reason, everyone just did not seem to tell me that it was way tougher than everyone thought or expected. And so they say, oh, if you went to Stanford, you'll definitely get something, or it wouldn't be difficult at all, blah, 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 blah. And no one really says what you would go through before getting the job. So when I got into Stanford, the first thing that a career person kept saying, so we have an office of career services. The first thing she kept saying was that as international students, you you find it more difficult to get a job. And this was me then in class looking like that sort of was very counterintuitive, or it was opposite from what I've been hearing or what I had thought. So I'm like, okay, why is it going to be difficult? Are there no jobs? Are there not this? And so I just realized that at that point I realized that, you know, as an immigrant, first of all, you are as a proposed immigrant, let me use that word, you are at a disadvantage first, and then secondly, as African, you are disadvantaged. Thirdly, not just African, as Nigerian, you are disadvantaged. And then what else again? And then as a foreign trained lawyer, you are also disadvantaged. So I was looking at myself having four stumbling blocks right in front of me that I just did not see how I could cure. It wasn't something that I could cure. I couldn't change the color of my skin. I couldn't change, the fact that I was African. I couldn't change the fact that I was Nigerian. I couldn't change nothing. It was really nothing. Am I foreign trained as a lawyer? Yes. There was really nothing I could do about it. And so for me, at that point, all I was thinking about was, so how do I put myself out there to be able to get a job? This was at the early stage. But something in me just kept saying, oh, hey, you figure something out. You figure something out. This was in September. Now, by March of 2023, when I still hadn't gotten a job, it dawned on me that, hey, this thing is real, right? Because I had done about 5 or 6 interviews with big law firms, both in London and in the US, and never got picked. And for me, the question was, did I not have the experience? I mean, I had 5 years worth of experience, court transactional experience with a big law firm in Nigeria that I thought was was transferable to both the US and the UK, and any big law firm in the US or UK would be, would be happy to have me. And this was me at this point not being able to land a job after doing interviews, getting to the last stage. And I just didn't know what the problem was. And when I saw the people that they hired, I knew that in terms of quality between myself and them, I knew that it just seemed like the difference was just maybe the color of my skin and the country they came from. They didn't have as much experience as I did. They most likely thought that they did not get through it. But for me, I just realized that at that point that, okay, look, we're in this. And as the months went by, I realized that doing an LLM wasn't the best option for me. If I was planning to stay in the US or work in the US, then I shouldn't have been doing an LLM. I didn't need to spend 5 years in Nigeria before coming here to do what I'm doing now. Because then again, even if you spend 12 years in your home country as a lawyer practicing, if you come to the US, Americans would always just say, hey, you start as a first year again. So, Tella, you remember that feeling of being a trainee associate? You get to do it again. And for me, I just felt like, oof, that's the worst feeling ever. To think that your experience is not, they deem it not relevant, that you've worked so long a time and you've had such experience. For me, that was a challenge. Trying to convince people, and that's the thing I was trying to do, that, you talk to a lot of people, you do a lot of networking, send very cold emails out. I call it very cold emails because These people don't know you from nowhere. They see a very random person from not from the US emailing them, and you would be asking them, okay, hey, this is me. I have this experience. I went to this school. I need a job. Do you have a job? I've been trying to convince them to let them know why they should hire me. I don't know if that makes sense, or why I would be a good fit, or that sort of thing. And then I felt like I was doing so much. I went to Stanford. I have 5 years worth of experience. It's as bad. Tell you, it's as bad as some of these folks think that Nigeria we don't speak English. It's that bad. They're super ignorant. So you would hear things like, "Oh, is and English is it your first language?" Someone will make a compliment and say, "Oh, you speak English really well," and I'll be like, "Is that supposed to be a compliment? Is that supposed to be actually make me feel bad? Because why would you think I wouldn't speak English very well, right?" And they would ask very mundane questions like, "Oh, is Nigerian common law or civil law?" And this is just me sitting down in my chair looking at them and say, okay, it's common law, but I, I just get weak by those sorts of questions. And then that tells you that you are buried in a very dark little hole that it would take you a while to crawl out of simply because you are termed a foreign trained attorney, that sort of thing. So those were the major challenges that I had to sort of get myself out of. And then the immigration status. For Americans, immigration is a very big deal for them. Um, it's not something that they take very lightly. So if they realize that you don't have, you know, papers, like if you don't have either your H-1B or work visa or work authorization, they're not very keen on hiring you. And so trying to convince them, okay, I have a 1 year work authorization after my program, and shortly after that, we can reevaluate and see whether you'd be happy to sponsor me for a work visa. Most of these law firms don't want to sponsor you, right? Some of them think of it like they have a quota for the sort of people they can sponsor. And trust me, it's not you they want to use it on. They don't want to use it on you, right? In their heads, you're like, oh, if we find this person from Australia or this person from, the UK that has such experience and we want to bring them in, maybe that's the person we want to use it on. But we don't want to use it on this silly Nigerian that's sort of looking for a job in the US that, it's going to come start as a first year. And yeah, that was a major challenge for me, trying to convince people and say, oh, hey, I don't have a work authorization after the 1 year OPT, but I mean, I'm a hard worker, right? Afterwards, let's start. We can reevaluate things and see how things go from there. That was for immigration, and the other challenge that I had was the rejections. At some point, rejections sort of take a toll on you. When you get rejected for God knows whatever reason, um, it just takes a toll on you. It affects your confidence for some reason. Before I came to the US, I'd never been rejected for a job. Well, okay, no, let's not put it that way. Because it's only UUB that I worked in. Let's not put it that way. Um, um, so before I came to the US, I had only worked in UUBO. I hadn't really dealt with how rejection feels, right? Um, After law school, I got into UUBO. I had applied other places, but even though firms like Olani Wajayi and Alukan Ibodi, and even though I didn't get a rejection per se, right, because UUBO came along, it was like, oh, okay, it's a top tier law firm, so what's the big deal? I never got responses from those other firms, but for UUBO coming through, it was like I didn't have to deal with that rejection at that point in time. And then because I've always had my way educationally and my career line, I'd always had my way. Gone to school, looked for a first class, didn't quite make a first class in law school, but fell a little short. But got into a big law firm, and then got into a top law school. For me, I've always had that trajectory, right? And I never really learned how to deal with rejection. And so when the rejection started coming in, it made me feel like, are you sure you're as good as you thought you were? I started doing the reassessment for myself generally. Okay, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? And then I started thinking that everything I was doing right was wrong and was second guessing myself. And as the days went by, I just thought, okay, maybe the US is not just meant for me, right? And those were one of the things that I felt like, okay, I needed to work. I needed to walk through. Like if I got through, that mental phase of feeling rejected, then maybe I would feel better and be able to have a better outlook. Um, there was a law firm, a very big law firm in DC. If I say the name of the firm, a lot of people would know the firm, and I I I got the interviews. I got invited for the interview through a Nigerian lady. She was the only Nigerian lady that I think was quite helpful. Some of the Nigerians were helpful, but a lot of Nigerians in the industry were not as helpful. Sadly, Tele, I think that's the reality. A lot of Nigerians, they were. To be honest, Tele, I don't know. That's one of the things I also learned in the US, that your country's man, your people. At least to me, I don't know about other people in the US, but at least to me, I didn't feel like there were Nigerians in the industry, but there were a lot of Nigerians in the industry. There are a ton of Nigerians. So some of the people I met will give you tips and turns, but to actually actively help, I didn't feel that way. There's just a few that helped, but and so for me it just felt like, I think, like doing like gatekeeping kind of thing, making sure that other Nigerians don't come in. Because I started wondering, like, why? Because there's a Kenyan friend that I have. She got into a big law firm as well, and she got in through a Kenyan lady who was already in there, right? She handheld her through the process, gave her tips, put in her resume to be considered and all that. I have some Indian friends who went through the same thing. I have some Asian friends who, their own people sort of pushed to get them in. Like, you would even see it in the US that if you hire an Indian person in an organization today, give it 6 months. From then, 5 other Indians have come into the organization. But for some reason, I just didn't feel like I had that help from my country's people. But this lady was very nice. She was super nice, and she sort of held my hands through the process. The interviews went well. In fact, I thought that they loved me. I thought I would be resuming there by October, November. And then I met the last guy. For some reason, I knew at that interview that, hey, this guy wasn't having it. I'm not sure what exactly it was. I'm not sure whether it was my skin tone. I'm not sure whether it was my accent. I'm not sure whether it was my experience. But the feel after the sort of feedback I got afterwards was that he didn't just think that, while every other person loved me, he by himself didn't think that I had the sort of mid-level experience that they were looking for. And for me, I just kept wondering to myself, like, so how else could I have shown my experience? I kept doubting myself over and over and over again. And for me, what clicked at the end of that was, you have an LLM, you have a foreign degree. There's one thing that Americans would always do: what they don't understand, they will run from. They don't understand how your LLB works. They don't understand how your LLM works, and they'll flee. That's just it. They would expect someone else to take a chance on you, and when they have brushed you up, then they can consider you. But before then, they wouldn't be looking at you, essentially. And that was one major part of the struggle that I had. And the interviews would always go very well. It would always start with, "Oh my God, we had such an interesting conversation," or "We had such an amazing time together." But just that one person at the end would just be like, "No," that sort of thing. And dealing with those sorts of rejections when you're not really sure exactly what you did wrong, really just sort of tweaked my brain a little bit.
I mean, it can really take a toll on your mental health, especially as you said, like if you've had it relatively easy or smooth in life, with school, law school, and then, getting your first job, of course, and you were a star boy there. So it's like, is there something wrong with me? You sort of have like an identity crisis. Who am
Yeah.
I? What am I really doing here? Am I even sure this is the right path for me? But you were so resilient in the process, and that is something to be admired.
I remember talking to this a Nigerian that I'm not going to mention his name, but it was, it was a Nigerian that I told you, like, I asked for a meeting. I said, "Oh, hey, I see that you're in this firm. I just got in here, and you know, I'm looking to um, see how it's possible to get into this firm." And he earned my email for like 4 months, and I had back to back follow ups. So like I would follow up every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and he aired me for almost 4 months. And finally, when he responded, he said, "Oh, let's have a chat." We had a chat virtually, and the chat was done in 10 minutes. The chat was done in 10 minutes. So we did the chat, and then he said that the first thing he said is that, "First of all, I just want to tell you that we're not hiring." I said, "We haven't even gone through pleasantries, bah." And that was one of the worst informational chats I've ever had. Um, she just said, "First of all, I want to just let you know that we're not hiring. It's going to be very tough." Like he had, what he did at that time was to break me down further or tear me down further than I already was at the time. Like, so when he was done telling me all the bad things, right? I'm like, what am I talking to you for again? Then explain to me. He just said, "Oh, we're not hiring. We're not looking for associates that that you would fit in. We're looking for people who have US law experience." Um, and this was me trying to propose to him that, okay, I'm willing to do a summer internship role, if that would be able to give them some sort of a sense as to how good I am, or that sort of thing. And he just was, when someone is very unhelpful, he just was very unhelpful. And so every time I asked him, I said, "Okay, is there someone else in the firm that you could introduce, maybe a partner that you could introduce me to, and I can be able to have a conversation?" Because sometimes I feel like I think I have a good personality. I don't know whether that's true, but I think I have a good personality. I think I have the ability to make people like me or love me when I want to. Um, and for me, I feel like sometimes emails or text messages could be read in whatever tone the recipient wants to, read it. And if I'm in person having a conversation with whomever, not even virtually, but like in person, I feel like I can sway someone into liking me or into giving me a chance. And so that was sort of thing I was looking for, that, okay, hey, I know you're not recruiting, but how about you introduce me to maybe a partner, and let me take it from there. That, "Oh, this is someone I just met. He went to Stanford." Just do the basic introduction. I'm not saying that you should tell the person that you've known me for 50 years, right? I'm just saying, do the basic introduction that, "Oh, I met this person and I think he has a good career projection or has a good resume. I think you should have a conversation with him, just because he's looking for mentors and stuff like." Just say something. And that was what I was hoping that I could get out of that conversation. And so when I asked him for an introduction, Taylor, he said no. He told me no. So, like, he told me to my face, like, no.
No.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said no. He said
Some
no.
people are just
This was me on that Zoom meeting. I was like, okay, is there a reason why that you're telling me no? And he's just like, he just doesn't do introductions, not for anybody, not for any Nigerian, not for. And I was just like, okay, well, thank you so much for your time, but I really appreciate you taking, the time to talk to me. But deep down within, I was just like, you shouldn't have, you should have just aired me, and there was really no need having this conversation. In 10 minutes, that conversation was over. And at that point, I sort of realized that, the fact that someone is a Nigerian in a law firm doesn't necessarily mean that, they would be really open to help. And that's one of the things that they taught us at, the career office, which was different from what my reality was. That look for people from your country, like your country homes people. Look for them. If they're in a law firm, it's easier to connect with someone from the same country or from the same tribe as you, to be able to leverage that relationship or connection to get a favorable introduction, and then hopefully it would turn into something fruitful. But I didn't have that because some of the Nigerians I was meeting either were not in the position to help or did not want to help, or I just met them at a bad time. So that was I don't know. I think Nigerians need to do better in terms of the outlook, but some Nigerians have been helpful, right? A lot of Nigerians have been helpful, but I feel like the proportion of the proportion of helpful people as to the unhelpful ones don't match.
So, so I just thought of this question. Would you move to Nigeria if, let's say, if you were given the opportunity now? Would you move back to Nigeria?
To be honest, I considered it. I wouldn't lie. I considered it when I was having a baby and I didn't have a job. Like, tell her, you have no idea what it feels like to be having a baby, not having a job, having no idea of where money is coming from, and knowing that you had a blossoming career in Nigeria. I was almost throwing in the towel at some point and just saying, "Oh, hey, let's move back to Nigeria." I considered it, to be honest, but one of the things that made me think otherwise was that I could be so much more. I just knew it in my bones that I could be so much more here. This opportunity is a once in a lifetime thing. If you don't make use of it now, I don't know that it's going to come back again. It could come back, but there's no assurance that it will come back. So figure out a way to make it work. And I thought about it then until I got the job I got now. But yeah, if for the right price, maybe, but I doubt. Maybe after I've had all my kids. After I've had all my kids, maybe I'll consider it. But no, never say never. Never say never. I've gotten a lot of offers. Funny enough, I've gotten a lot of offers. I don't think I want to be specific right now, but I know I wanted to shake tables, but I gotten a lot of offers to come back to Nigeria at a higher role or at a higher pay, um, and I sort of made up my mind and turned it down at the time. Some I put on hold and said, okay, I'll consider it later on. And but here I am just saying, well, let me have all my kids first. Let them get the benefits of being born in the US, right? And then we can consider it. I was telling someone, I said, if I go back to Nigeria now, I know that I've made one success in life, with my daughter, having her here in the US, and if that is where I end things in life, I'm good, So never say never. If the right price comes, the right amount comes, you never can tell.